Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Let's turn to the Central Intelligence Agency's new assessment of the origins of the COVID-19 virus, saying that the best evidence in the agency's view is that it was this lab in Wuhan, China. Let's start with the CIA's new director, John Ratcliffe, explaining this report on Fox Sunday.
I had the opportunity on my first day to make public an assessment that actually took place in the Biden administration. So it can't be accused of being political, and it does assess. The CIA has assessed that the most likely cause of this pandemic that has wrought so much devastation around the world was because of a lab-related incident in Wuhan. And so we'll continue to investigate that moving forward. But I think it was important for the American people to see an institution like the CIA get off the sidelines and be truthful about what our intelligence shows, at the same time of protecting us from adversaries like China if they caused or contributed to this.
Kim, still a lot of uncertainty here about this. The assessment from the CIA is with low confidence. It apparently is not based on any sort of new intelligence that the CIA has gathered, only just a revisiting of all the evidence so far. And the CIA also says that research-related and natural origin scenarios of the COVID-19 pandemic remain plausible. But notable that, especially with a new CIA director coming in and saying that this assessment was done under the Biden administration, I am choosing to release it when they did not.
Yeah, I think there's two important things here. You are right that this assessment that was released is still rated with low confidence. The other scenarios are still plausible. The important thing is, though, is that this is a switch in the CIA's assessment. Prior to this, the CIA had assessed that it was indeed from natural causes. And remember all the talk we had over the years about China's wet markets, et cetera, and so on. So I think that's important. It also, by the way, puts the CIA on the same page broadly as the FBI, which for a while had been on the record of having assessed this as more likely to have been a lab-related incident. But the most important thing, Kyle, as you know, is simply that we are hearing about this. And then stop and think about this. There are a lot of Americans out there who have a very dim view of both the FBI, the DOJ, and our intelligence services, and in part because they believe that they're not always playing straight with them. That the accusation in recent years is that they've been playing politics. And when Americans hear this, it's hard not to feel as though maybe the reason the Biden CIA did not release this updated assessment is because the enormous capital that the public health community and some in the intel community had put into insisting that this had to be natural causes and shaming online. Remember this conversation, how many people were told that they were nuts and crazy and how dare you were trying to cause an international incident if you suggested it was from the lab. The incoming on them was huge, and a lot of it was coming from Democrats and Biden. So to have this out and to find out that it's been there, but no one had told us about it, I think is really striking, and the kind of transparency that's going to be really important if you want to restore people's confidence in some of these institutions.
Bill, maybe we will never find out with any certainty the origins of COVID-19, or maybe it will come years from now when we get a new government in Beijing and an opening of the archives that think about all the secrets that were revealed after the fall of the Soviet Union. I guess to my mind, part of what makes this story so interesting is when COVID first came out, natural origin, I think, was presumed because there are examples of that happening all the time. Viruses crossing over, the SARS virus being an obvious one. That was not exactly a pandemic on the level of COVID or the flu of 1917-18, but it was a real thing that happened, and that was a crossover from a natural virus. And to my mind, the longer that went on without being able to trace back the origin, though, the more doubts that were raised. And I agree with Kim. I think it's notable that the CIA is changing its assessment now joining the FBI, though my understanding is there is still some disagreement within the intel community. And I guess I'm not sure what is to be done about it now. It's not as if we can hold China accountable for that, though. I guess one thought is to give a little bit closer skepticism of lab controls and lab practices, not only here, but elsewhere in places where the U.S. has leverage on those kinds of things and its allies and so forth.
Yeah, and emphasize honesty in our government institutions. You know, Kim mentioned the reasons that the public health authorities seem to really go after. They didn't just disagree with people who said lab leak. And it's important to note, it's not just the FBI, it's several other intelligence sources. This is where the CIA is becoming mainstream. And I think part of this hints at the difficulties with China. China has never been honest about what they know about the pandemic, and that's a huge problem. And I think one of the reasons the effort was not to have the lab leak was both the U.S. had been giving grants to the Wuhan Institute that could be used for gain of function, so forth. So that would be embarrassing. And also just the fact, if we said it came from the lab, kind of put pressure on President Biden to do something about China. So that's a problem people have. I didn't even know this study existed until John Ratcliffe made it public, an internal CIA report. It's outrageous that they've done this. And all it's done is further discredit the people we trust to give us the real news about what's going on in the world.
And Kim, we'll give you the last word, but the point that Bill makes about creating a diplomatic problem vis-a-vis China may also explain, I mean, I don't know this for sure, but why the Biden administration did not release this assessment by the CIA. Because if it starts to look like a consensus of the U.S. intelligence agencies that this thing came out of that Wuhan lab, then the next question to the party in power is, what are we going to do about that?
Well, that's right. And I think we have a ways to go before we get there. Again, the low confidence rating is important, and I think one of the unfortunate things about this is that absent, for instance, a regime change in China and then an unprecedented decision by China to be transparent about what went on in Wuhan, we're not likely to have an outside means of verifying this for certain. And of course, there are always diplomatic potentialities when you are releasing. But I think this is going to remind so many Americans there was a lot of frustration and a belief that the Biden administration was stepping softly always with regard to China, whether it was this or, the spy balloon flying across it, like whatever it was. They just seemed to care so deeply about potentially their priority of keeping China on board for their climate agenda, no matter what other concerns, issues from corporate espionage all the way down to intelligence gathering to questions about the virus, they were all dismissed. So I think Americans also are looking forward to an administration that is a little bit more willing to tackle some of these issues with China head on, even if there is some diplomatic feather ruffling along the way.
Thank you, Kim and Bill. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Potomac Watch.